Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to cut and sew this bubu dress with a Kaftan V neckline. So without further ado, let's get started. Right now, I'm gonna head to cut out my front and my back piece. I made sure I calculated my client's measurement to get the amount of material I'll be needing to cut out the dress. Okay, so what to go ahead to do now is drawing out the starting point, of which I've done, as you can see. So that is where I'll begin my measurement. Right now, I will measure my shoulder line. Divide your shoulder by 2. But firstly, I'll take out my width measurement. I'll use 3 for my width, my neck width here. So from there, afterwards I'll calculate my shoulder measurement, okay? I divide my client's measurement by 2, alright? So I've marked it out. From this point, I will check my sleeve length, depending on how long you want it to be. So that is what we are going to do next. You mark out your sleeve length from that shoulder point. Remember, it's an attached sleeve from the shoulder. You don't have to cut it out separately, alright? So afterwards, I'll take the length of my armhole. But before then, we mark out 1 inches, alright? So that 1 inches is for the slope of the shoulder. Then when you're done with that, you connect it to that point where you marked out your shoulder, the shoulder line, as I'm doing right now. Okay, so afterwards I went ahead to mark out the opening for my armhole. Okay, so for my armhole I'll be using 11 inches. I think it should be okay for my clients, right? So it is the same measurements I got from this, my shoulder to my sleeve length area is what I'm going to attach. I'm going to mark out on that 11 inches that I drew earlier. I'm doing this because I want it to have accuracy. Okay, so I'll mark out my line now. Just watch what I'm doing. Understand me. So I'll mark a straight line and connect it to that point. So it's from this point now that I'll mark out my bust area. So this will be my bust point. Okay. So my width is 3 inches, right? And then my depth also, the depth of my waist is going to be 3 inches. So we're doing 3 by 3. So when you mark out the depth, you connect the lines together. But first of all, I marked 1.5 inches. That one was for my back neckline. Alright, I don't want to cut out the front neckline first, so I don't want to mark out the front neckline first, so I don't mistake and cut it out. Alright, so right now we're taking out our bust measurement, my client's measurement divided by 4, so I'll add 4 inches extra because it's a free dress. Alright, so from this shoulder point I will come down and take my waist measurement, which is 16 inches, alright? And then from that waist region to my hip line is 9 inches, right? Sometimes I use 8.5 depending on the client's length, right? So for this one, I think I'm going to use 9 inches. That's what I used earlier. So I'll mark out my waist point and then so what I got for my bust, remember, I'm just going to deduct 1 inches from what I got from my bust area, so that the waist can have just a little bit of the shape. Okay, and that is what I did there. And then my hip measurements, I'll divide it by 4, and then I added 4 inches for the freedom. You understand? And then, as you can see right now, I'm adding extra 1 inches. Okay, but along the line, after I was done cutting the dress, I realized that my measurements, the allowances was kind of much, so I went ahead and traced it out and remove the excesses. Okay, so I would advise you not to go beyond 4 inches for your client's measurements. All right, so take note. So from what I got on my hip line, that is what I inserted. That is the same measurement I used on the full length of my dress. So as you can see in this video also, the length of the material was not enough. So after taking out this measurement, I went ahead to cut out the material that was already short for the dress, and then I added it up to complete the length of my dress. Okay, so I would think the reason why I was doing this was because of the pattern of the material. I wanted it to align. So right now I'll mark out my measurements and I'll align it as I'm doing, right? Connect it from your hip down to your waist, and from your waist to your bust point. So this is the shape of my clients. So right now, the length of my client dress is not long enough, as you can see, right? So what I'm going to do next is to measure the amount that I'll be needing to complete the length of the dress. Now I'll cut it out and attach it on that side, alright? So but before then, let's go ahead and cut out the shape of the dress. So we are done with the cutting. The next thing now to do is to separate the front and the back, okay? Because the front neckline is different from the back neckline. Remember, the width of our back was 3 inches by 1.5, alright? So our front neck is going to be different. That is why we have to cut them separately. So right now we have our front piece ready. The next thing to do is to go ahead and take out the measurements for our neck piece, okay? So from the shoulder to 16 inches, that is where I'll be taking our line from, okay? Measure from the shoulder to this point. I use 16 inches for mine. That's where I want it to stop. Then I'll connect it this way, alright? So the next thing to do now is to mark out 2 inches from this 16 inches I've marked out earlier, okay? I'll mark the 2 inches all the way to the neck width, as you see me doing. So from this point now, I'll connect my lines to meet each other. I'll connect my lines, alright? So go ahead and do it this way. And then afterwards, I'm going to mark out the V. This is 10 inches I'll be using. To determine where you want your V neckline to end, you can go ahead and use 9 inches, but I'll be using 10 inches. Okay, so I'll mark the line out. So from this point now, I will connect my ruler to this width. Make sure it's on the edge of the neck width, okay? Then you connect the line slantly this way. You mark it to that 10 inches point where I marked earlier. Just watch what I'm doing. Can you see that the lines are not the same? 2 inches I measured, and the slants, they are quite different. So it is from that line now I'm going to cut out my V neck. Okay, so go ahead and do that. So guys, our neckline is ready. Okay, so what I'm doing now is marking out the inside from the outside, just to differentiate between the good side of the material, so I don't mix it up. You get? So afterwards, what I'll do next is to attach the length of my dress and then cut out my linings, depending on what you want to do. For me, I want to use lining for this particular dress. Okay, so guys, I've gone ahead to cut out my lining and I make sure that they are equal. But aside the width being equal, I didn't make the length of the lining to be the same with that of the material. Okay, so please go ahead and do yours the same way. So guys, I've gone ahead to turn out the necessary parts of my clothes, which is the shape, the sleeve area. But as you're seeing in this video, I didn't turn out the neck areas because that is where we are going to be attaching our panel, right? So go ahead and fix your lining if you choose to, and then make sure you don't turn out the neck area. So right now what we'll be doing is to measure from this back point. As you can see, I notched that middle so that I can differentiate the midpoints. So I'll measure from that point down to where the cotton ended. So in this area, I'm going to determine how long I will cut from the panel. So what we have here is like 20 inches. Okay, so we have 20 inches, but I'll go ahead and cut out extra 3 to 4 inches because I want my panel to extend to that region. Okay, so guys, this is the pieces I'll be using. This is the material I'll be using for my panel. So I'm gonna ahead to cut out 24 inches by the length, and it's by 2, right? And then the width, I'll be making use of 6.5 inches. Okay, you can go ahead to use maybe 5 inches or 6 inches, but I prefer to use 6.5 inches, right? So I'm going to mark out my width area. When I'm done marking out my width area, I'll just cut it out because this is what we'll be needing. Okay, so guys, remember I told you that the material would unfold. So now I'll go ahead and split it open like you see me doing. Okay, so guys, after we're done splitting it open, the next thing I'll do now is go over to my sewing machine and then I'll join this area together. So guys, the next thing we'll be doing now is to measure the length of our opening. Remember that 10 inches we measured earlier, right? So right now what I'll do is to measure from the midpoint of my back neckline area to that point that I just notched right now. So we'll determine the length of that area. So we're having 13 inches here. So this is the 13 inches we'll be using for our neck opening. So right now I'm going ahead to join that point I told you about. So the next thing to do is to iron it open. That is what I'm going to do now. So after I was done ironing it that way, so the next thing is to do is to fold it by 2 and give it a very good press like this. Okay, so I'm ironing it out so that I'll get my midpoint, the middle of my panel. That is why this ironing is very necessary to me. But if you don't want to do it this way, you can just go ahead and use your chalk and mark out the midpoint of the material, right? So after I done ironing, the next thing to do is to open it up this way. You can see the line, right? So open it up this way and make sure you arrange it to be in place, right? And then from here now, that's 13 inches we measured. I'll mark it out on the fabric, okay? So this is going to be our neck opening. So from this point now, I'll just sew a straight line till the end. From this point, I'm going to sew a straight line till the end, okay? And when I'm done, you see, I'll turn it over this way. So I'll go over to my sewing machine. I've gone ahead to do that, and when I was done doing it, I just ironed it out. And when I was also done ironing, I just went over to my sewing machine. Then I sewed. I just top stitch the stitch around this area because that is where we are going to be fixing on the dress. So this is going to serve as our neckline, and this other area is what's going to attach to the dress. So this is our dress. Let me show you how we are going to be fixing our neckline. Okay. So this is our neckline here. You just go ahead and turn it over this way. Let the midpoints meet with the dress midpoints. Make sure that the midpoints are meeting together, right? And then from that midpoints, you sew it this way. You sew it from that midpoint round to this particular point I'm pointing. Alright? And then you repeat the same thing that you've done to this side on this other side. Okay? So guys, I've gone ahead to my sewing machine and I've done exactly what I showed you right now. Okay, I've gone ahead to fix the neck, and this is what it's looking like. So the next thing to do is to fold my remaining inches of my panel. Okay, so as you can see, I've already gone ahead to use an iron to fold this area in, because that point I'll be folding it inside and making a top stitch around that point. Okay, so you should go ahead and do the same thing, right? Afterwards, I'll go ahead and make a top stitch around this point. I'll repeat the same thing on the area, the both side, and also make a top stitch around the neck area. So guys, that's the end of our tutorial, and this is how our dress turned out to be. So thank you guys for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.